What's happening, Delco? I'm Rich Shane, and welcome to the What's Happening Delco podcast. Today's episode features Mike Contreras of 2SP Brewing Company. It was recorded on our sister podcast, Fermented Adventure the Podcast. We hope you enjoy this episode. He's Mike Contreras. I'm Rich Shane. Dawn Ranieri's here, and this is Fermented Adventure the Podcast. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're here is 2SP Brewing in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and this is one of our favorite breweries. You guys put out all these releases. 2SP Brewing, how did that get started?
That's a great question. So we are coming up on our 8th year right now. So we started in 2015, and I'll just tell it from my perspective. So I'm the director of sales and marketing here at the brewery, and I previously worked at Dogfish Head. And they're a Milton-based brewery, and part of my territory was, my territory with them in sales was Delaware and Maryland, and one of my accounts was Two Stones. So everybody asks, where's 2SP come from? We've got the restaurants called Two Stones Pub. So anyway, the owner of Two Stones Pub, Mike Stiglitz, gives me a call, and he said, I'm thinking about starting a brewery, asking me all these questions from the sales and marketing side, and I'm like, it's tough out there. There's a lot of breweries, and at Dogfish, you got to have great marketing. You got to really know how to sell the product. It's not just enough to have good beer, but it really does help. And Stig says, well, would you ever think about, possibly joining us? And I'm like, I have a pretty good job, blah, blah, blah. But it sounds exciting, but I'm thinking he hasn't even told me who the brewer was. So he says, I asked him, and he says, I got Bob Barrar. So, for a lot of people in Delco, they know who Bob Barrar is. Outside of Delco, the beer community really knows who Bob is. So Bob's one of the most awarded brewers in the country. He's got over, I want to say about 38 Great American Beer Fest medals and 11 World Beer Cups. So I'm being told my buddy is going to start a brewery, and he's going to start with one of the best brewers in the country, and he wants me to run sales. So I can't think of an easier job, right? So Bob was previously at Iron Hill and Media, and great location, great restaurant group. But Bob was only brewing beer for that location. So it's like, it's like having an Olympic swimmer in a bathtub, right? He can only be there, brew his product there. It was our job, right, to build this brewery and bring his beer to the region. We all got together. Bob is a native Delconian. He's originally from Glen Olden. He lives in Rutledge now. And we started this brewery up, just to really get behind him and what he does and bring it to the region.
Now, you said a lot there, and my mind is thinking, wow, 2015, while you had those micro brews like Iron Hill, and you had Dogfish Head, and you had other larger regional breweries, this really was just a trend that was getting started and ramping up. Coming from Dogfish Head, what did you, or where was, sales and marketing, what was the vision that you brought, or where you wanted to see 2SP go?
So, it was, before Dogfish, I had been in the industry for quite some time. I was with Rogue before that, and I lived in Southern California. So, I got to see what, a craft boom looked like, because I was in LA, but San Diego was right there. And the things that were happening there in 2006, 2007, 2008 was pretty crazy. And it wasn't like it was over here, which was, there's a few breweries. And then, when I got to Dogfish, you saw more and more breweries pop up, but not like it is today. So when we started up this brewery in 2015, I want to say there was about 7,000 breweries in the country. Today, I think there's well over 10,000. So my vision was like, we're going to build a sort of a regional brewery. Like, if you're familiar with Evolution Brewing in Salisbury, they built a nice sized brewery. They represented the Eastern Shore. There wasn't many other breweries out there. And that was kind of our plan. It's like, let's, not like go to all 50 states or 30 states or 20 states. Let's just kind of focus on the tri-state region, sort of be a player. But, so the vision was like, hey, listen, on the sales and marketing side, we're going to build a nice regional brewery to have local beer for our community, that they can be proud of and they can get fresh.
I get a really strong feeling, and we're in Delco, and, Delco, it says you have made in Delco. You have Delco-related beers and, little things like Wooder in the title. what was the business concept, or what was the business vision as it rotated around Delaware County and the region, and the personality you were looking to take in a brewery?
Yes, I mean, we're not that clever. I'll say that, you know, and, we can't, as with regards to like, you know, being a brewery here, we want to represent the community. And a real big thing about, I mentioned, you know, with Dogfish, marketing is very important. But the one thing that I saw with other breweries, I won't name names, is, you know, they kind of, it felt a little fake. It felt a little forced. With us, it's pretty organic. It's who we are. It's where we're from. And we want to represent that. So, for us, there was no like, MBA sitting in a room and just saying, oh, you know, it was more of us hanging out with some friends, some of our design friends who helped us with the branding. When they would just listen to us talk, they'd be like, "Oh, we should use that," you know, or "Hey, made in Delco." It's, you know, we were Delco's first production brewery, right? So saying "made in Delco" just seemed obvious to us, right? And as you guys know, Delco is a country unto itself, right? So, and we're very proud of that. And, you know, it's kind of, it's a fun place to be. It's definitely sticks out in this region, South Jersey, Delaware, Philly 5 County, and you know, we love it, and we feel like over the past few years, Delco's certainly having a moment, and it just so happens we're along for the ride, so it's fun.
Well, in the beginning, while we were talking before we started the podcast, I did say, I mean, the facts and figures of the brewery.
Yeah.
You said you know those.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, barrel capacity right now, how many, barrels are you producing?
Sure. So we are, I think, according to last year's numbers, now there's some breweries that might have not reported, but we're the 10th largest brewery in Pennsylvania. So our production last year was around 7,000 barrels. This year we finished about 7,300. So just for clarification for the listeners, a barrel is equal to 2 half kegs. So that's 31 gallons. So we did, 7 times 31 gallons. 7,000 times 31 gallons.
Wait, we haven't started drinking beer yet, so we should be able to do math, right?
I got fuzzy math here. So we brew a decent amount of beer, and it's and we distribute. We have a tasting room here in Aston. We also have the Tap House, 2SP Tap House in Chadds Ford, and we have 6 restaurant locations where we have guest taps and 2SP beers. So at the Two Stones Pubs, we're opening up a new concept in Newark, Delaware called 2S Pizza, which would be all 2SP beer.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
I can't wait. And then, outside of that, most of our business, that's about 10% of our business, right? 90% of it, though, is in, we service Philly 5 County area, so Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Philadelphia, Delco. We go to Lehigh Valley, Lancaster, Berks, North Jersey. We were in South Jersey, but we're kind of reevaluating that right now. Delaware, Maryland, and we actually export to Japan. So we've been doing that for the past 4 years. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
So there's a big Japanese contingency that's just, we want 2SP, right?
So they didn't know it, but we we brought it to them. So it's kind of a longish story, but basically I went to grad school out in California, and I played rugby out there. And one of the guys on my team was a little 5'6" Japanese guy. I'm a bigger guy for the listeners. I'm about 6 foot, but I'm a heavier set guy. And there was a lot of South Africans on the team who were very big guys too. We see this Japanese guy come out who is like 5'6", maybe $130. And, rugby's a rough game. So we made sure that, the big thing with rugby is we want, for a team, is to have players, to have bodies. So once a new guy comes out, we're like, hey, why don't you come have a beer with us? So we meet this guy. He barely speaks any English. His name's June. And we say, June, why don't you come grab a beer with us? And I guess in Japanese culture, it's, disrespectful to leave before the senior members leave during a gathering. So he's hanging out with me and these big South African guys, putting down some beers. I'm like, man, this guy can hang. So, and what better drinking buddy is there than somebody who doesn't speak English? So turns out he was in the MBA program. He was going for business. I was in the philosophy program. So him and I would get together at the library. I couldn't understand what he was studying. I tried to tell him what I was studying. I didn't understand it, but we just became very close friends. And one day when we were having a few beers, he said, if you ever open up your own brewery, I'm going to import your beer. And your buddies tall talk, but Japanese people are very serious. When they say something, they mean it. And we started the brewery up, and he says, he gives me a call. I was living in Philly at the time, and he says, Mike, I'm going to quit my job. I said, well, June, you have a family. Like, don't do that. He's like, no, I'm going to import your beer. I'm like, June, come on. Like, it's a tough business. I want to help him, but I know in any industry you need connections. And he was coming from a consulting field. So he's like, no, I'm going to do it. I said, all right, let's just talk, put a business plan together before you do anything. So a week later, he calls me. He's like, Mike, quit my job. I'm like, dude.
So much for the business plan.
Yeah. And then,
he's still working off of that first beer.
I guess so.
Doing.
Yeah. And then he says, I'm going to come out. And I said, when are you coming out? He says, next week. I'm like, where are you staying? And he's like, with you. So I had to put him up for, 2 weeks. And, I had mentioned before I was in the industry. So I had a lot of connections. So, what's interesting is, and I've been out there. It's fun. I was in Hiroshima drinking Delco lager. So pretty wild. I was in Osaka drinking Up and Out or IPA. But, what's really cool is that my buddy so the U.S. beer market here, it's an industry, right? So we brew the beer, we sell it to a middleman, essentially a wholesaler, and that wholesaler has a bunch of brands that they go sell to different bars and different beer stores. In Japan, all the breweries self-distribute. So he's the first guy in the country to start up that wholesale side of the business. So he brings us over a bunch of other breweries, and before he was paying somebody else to deliver the beer, and that's what everybody does over there. And he was telling me, he's like, I need to make money. And I asked him, like, how, the logistics and everything. And then he's explaining, I pay somebody to deliver the kegs. I said, how much do you pay? And he says, like, $20. I'm like, so each keg you pay $20? I'm like, you could pay for a truck in no time. So he goes out. I've ridden in the truck. The wheels are like the size of a lawnmower, like a little ride-along mower. And when I sat in it, the truck just completely bent. But he now works with other Japanese craft breweries and distributes the product. So pretty cool connection that Delco in Tokyo. So if you're in some areas of Tokyo and you say you're from Delco, they probably they might have had our beer. They might know a little bit about it. So pretty wild.
Cool. And the fun part about this for us is Japan is our second most listened to country for the podcast.
Oh, no kidding.
So we're going to hear from those Japanese listeners that have had anything from 2SP. That'll be a lot of fun.
Domo arigato. Yeah.
Mike, I hear, the way that 2SP has expanded.
Yeah.
How is it, or is it a mindset to still remain that community brewery, that community, drinking establishment where I can tell you come into your tasting room here, it's family. Yeah. It's friends. Yeah. You got Ange behind the bar. She's been here. Yeah. She's the face of this. Sometimes if she knows you, she already knows what you want to drink.
Right.
We Bud and Sissy, they're friends. I mean, I think they're already here. I think they're sleeping underneath the bar over there. But that's what you have. You have people that come here all the time. Yeah. How do you maintain that?
So, I mean, it's with the tasting room, and just our brewery and like with Delaware County and the surrounding areas that we also call our home, it's, the one thing that really sticks out to us in this area is it's working class. It's very, I don't care what you do or, how much money you make. It's just kind of, we're all people at the end of the day. I know that's just like a common thing to say, but it really is something here in Delco that stands apart versus somewhere like, I don't know, the main line or something, where it's like you can really feel that. Here it's like we're very no frills. The beer speaks for itself. The people speak for themselves. And it's just a fun environment that I think, I don't know. It's hard to It seems easy. It seems like you walk in here and it's just like you get a wide variety of people. I mean, we could use a new paint job in here. Sure. We could decorate nicely, but I don't know. I think we would lose a little bit of that character. And that character is, what I just mentioned. It's just like no frills. And people are looking for those environments, and they're more rare than I think we all think it might be.
Well, you said the beer speaks for itself.
Yeah.
We have 6 pours here, and where should we start with what's really going to be a representation of 2SP?
Sure. I mean, so I poured you a good variety. A lot of breweries will really focus on their IPAs.
Yeah, thanks for the 32-ounce growler pours of what we're going to be drinking today.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, you know some people. You got the hookup. A great starting point for us is Pony Boy. It's our light lager. I love that beer. The brewers love that beer. It is a light beer. It's not flashy. It's a golden light lager. It's 4%. It's clean. It's crisp. It's just really well balanced, and it's something that you can just, set it and forget. Like, just sip it, have fun with it, have 3, have 4, and you'll be, relatively speaking, you'll be all right compared to, drinking a high octane IPA or something. But that's the beer you'll see the brewers drinking after work. Me, that's the beer I bring to the tailgate, but that's probably our most drank beer by the 2SP staff.
You have a tremendous amount of experience in beer. You've come from a great lineage of beer producing areas and breweries. Do you have some beers that you drink that transport you back or create, hey, that was a memory I had with a beer?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have that experience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with Dogfish, I just having 60 minutes for the, first time fresh there. I know that beer is kind of polarizing now. I loved it back in the day when I worked at Rogue. I just remember when I got hired on, I was in Newport, Oregon, and, being a kid from the East Coast, I've been to Europe, been to Japan. Sure, I've experienced some elements of culture shock, but when I went to the West Coast, it was, I couldn't believe that this was the United States, and it could be so beautiful, and that the people were completely different, not necessarily better, but I just remember going up to Oregon for the first time, and I had a brutal bitter. And that beer has changed a few times. It's kept the same name, Brutal IPA. Before it was like a hopped up English style bitter. And I remember just eating, grilled oysters, put them on the grill, pop them, and just put them in butter and drink the Brutal bitter with it. Oh my God, the best. And there's a few other beers, a lot of Sierra Nevadas, the Bigfoot barley wine, which is a great companion on a winter night when you just want to kind of bunker in the Celebration Ale. I mean, that's something where it's, hey, the seasons are changing, and when you see the Celebration Ale out, that's kind of like an indicator that, all right, we're no longer, it's time to bundle up. But it's exciting when that beer comes out.
For me, this is a creamy, thirst-quenching beer. Mm-hmm. It's very approachable. You're right. I can have 4 to 6.
Yeah.
The nose, the flavor profile, I'm old enough to tell you, I used to drink at the vet. Well, I didn't drink, but that beer got handed down to my dad and my grandfather.
Yeah.
And, hey, would you like a sip of beer?
Right.
I'm sitting at the vet. Normally, we're up at the high level. I think the
700 Club.
I think they were like, well, yeah, I think we were more in the airplane club.
Okay, yeah, respect.
We were closer to the planes going over than we were to the field.
Yeah.
But my first nose on this, my first taste experience is I'm watching a Phillies game with my dad and my grandfather.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked you, are there beers that you have that transport you back to an experience?
Yeah.
And that's what that did for me.
That's awesome.
And that was really, and again, that's where I think beer or any kind of adult beverage can be transforming. But if I sit at the bar, I'm reliving that experience.
Yeah, that's great.
Each time.
Yeah.
It's really, there's a little bit of spiciness to this.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, there are IPAs on your menu. We love your stouts. I mean, we are big fans of that.
Yeah.
But, lagers are starting to lagers, pilsners. I think there's more of a craft to it, right?
Yeah, big time.
What is that sense for what 2SP is brewing when you say we want to make a world-class lager?
Yeah, no, I mean that's all awesome to hear, and it's kind of funny you saying it brings you back to the 700 Club and like the bleachers at the vet. But it's just when people think of, I want beer to taste like beer, we think of that generation of drinker, and that's kind of like a representation of, what that beer might taste like if it was, we had some bad beer in our day. And I think that's a very good, representation of what a good light beer could be. But getting back to, your original question, with us, when we approach beer, I mentioned before, we're not that clever. So I think, you see other breweries that really do experiment and they do want to add a ton of stuff to their beer. And I came from a brewery that used to do that, and it was fun. And it was sometimes the end result was like, it was interesting, but would I drink it again? Probably not. Now it's like, there's a lot of breweries who, putting even more crazy stuff in the beer. And for us, it doesn't even occur to us to do something like that. The baseline for us is when we approach a beer, the baseline is we got to make a good beer and a representation of that style and make it good. I know that sounds like pretty basic, but if you deal with our brewer, Bob, our other brewers like Jason and Kevin, it's like they approach that with, they're pretty serious about it. And that kind of guides them through, the recipe creation to the execution to just thinking about, okay, shelf life, right? They'll send me a note. Hey, if it happens, if beer gets long in the tooth on the shelf, if it's over what they think is a good period, all right, we'll get it out. You know what I mean? So our approach to brewing world-class beers in our mind and what we try to strive for is just making a great representation of that specific style, not really deviating from it too much, right? What the style asks for. Whereas other breweries kind of are like, let's go outside the lines with something and add our own unique kind of flair to it. We're not kind of, that's not our muse, I should say.
I think, as you touched on, you're the 7th largest beer producer in Pennsylvania.
10th, I think.
10th now?
10th, yeah.
73,
7,000. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Like that. Don't worry.
Say fuzzy math. We talked about that. This is my first 32-ounce growler, and I'll be working on the next one.
Yeah.
With that, I mean, I think that philosophy as to what you talk about and what you speak to really needs to say our brand is consistency, quality, and our drinker knows whether they come in and they get a draft, they get one of our bottles, they open up one of our cans, they're going to get that quality that they expect.
Yeah.
And they're not going to, but the craft industry is a wonderful place where if you want to add, if you want to go out and buy, a dozen pumpkin pies and throw it, into the fermenter, you can do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I won't drink it, but no. but
somebody there are people that do, and there are people that are big fans.
Yeah.
I mean, look, 2SP partners with Wawa, who is a huge convenience store of gas producing. Well, they don't produce their gas, but they sell gas.
Sure.
I mean, Wawa has a huge footprint. And you partner up with Wawa to make a stout, a coffee stout.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that? I mean, it doesn't happen if you don't maintain a level of quality. But how did as sales and marketing? How did that relationship get started?
I don't really want to make it sound like a marketing or basicness. It really, I am being sincere here. I just sent them an email.
That's all.
That was it. Yeah. So I sent them an email and I said, hey, listen, we were talking here, and a big struggle with us is, there are personalities here, and we really we'll have some conflicts about, hey, what are we going to brew this winter, this fall? And sales team wants something that they can sell. Brewers want to brew something that they want to brew. Sometimes those things don't, they don't relate, right? So the brewers might want to do like a very high octane barrel aged stout, and the sales team wants an IPA that they can get on tap lines that'll move very quickly. I mean, how many high octane stouts can you sell on tap? Not many. So anyway, I just thought, hey, listen, Bob's a really great stout brewer. I was at a Wawa and I saw that they had a new coffee out, and it was it was called something Reserve. And I sent him a note. I said, hey, listen, like, we're right around the corner from headquarters. Headquarters is in Media, just down Baltimore Pike. And, you know, we'd love to talk to you. Completely understand if you don't want to, you know, meet with us, these little guys. And they were actually really cool. And they responded right away. And they said, yeah, we'll come by. I'm like, okay.
Wawa's coming.
Wawa's coming. And, you know, if you come here, we really can't dress us up, you know? I mean, and I mean that literally and literally. I mean, it's Bob our head brewer wears cargo shorts every day. I've never seen him not wear pants, wear pants. Always wears cargo shorts, even if it's 5 degrees. He's walking around now with them. I can't ask him to wear pants, right? So they came in and we took them on a tour of the brewery, and they were familiar with us for their local. And they said, well, do you have a pitch? And I'm like, listen, I was just at your Westchester location. I saw that you have a reserve coffee. I imagine you guys probably rotate that. I imagine you have one during the winter, like a winter series one. And their eyes kind of lit up, and they said, yeah. You know, and they're saying, well, are you thinking of using our coffee in like a winter beer? I'm like, yeah, sure, a big stout. So it was perfect timing. They were looking to draw attention to this new series of coffees they were doing. I think they made the decision. There was one year when they didn't do the holiday coffee, their holiday blend. They knew that there was going to be a big stink from the public. So they thought, okay, let's, you know, do a beer and we can maybe take some of that attention away. And this was all happening in like September. They got approval from their board in October, and they wanted the beer released in November. And for any of the listeners who are familiar with the brewing process, that's kind of crazy, the timeline. But like, we're small, we're nimble, we don't have much red tape, so we were able to do everything within a short time frame. And the execution, I thought, from pretty well. There was great marketing. There was 2 helicopters that came to the release in Chad's Ford. The CBS News and NBC had helicopters circling around, and some of our guys here, when they see that, they get nervous with the helicopters. But that's another day. But excuse me, another story. But yeah, since then we took a break from it this year. They want to, hey, let's air it out. Let's work with some other people, which was great. We got to work with, we had done it for 4 years, and we got to work with my friends who own a coffee shop in South Philly called Herman's. And, we worked with, Little Goat Coffee out of Newark, Delaware, who makes fantastic coffee. And we brewed the same base recipe, used their coffees, different blends, and released them in the 2 different markets. And it was great because, people knew our brand. They knew the Wawa coffee stouts. They were looking for this new thing, and it went over great. But the people at Wawa are awesome. I know they just worked with K-May. I saw there was a lot of fanfare over that. So, good on them. And hopefully it's just bringing more attention to local breweries.
Yeah, and I think what it does is for beer fans, beer drinkers, it gives us more to look forward to. Yeah. But you've established something with that. You've established this community relationship, this identification with community businesses, community mainstays. Yeah. And I think what it does is it lifts everybody up.
Yeah.
And it gives a wonderful product for all of us to look forward to. So it's like, I love that also now you're doing some different things with some different opportunities, different coffee companies.
Yeah.
It really gives you a chance to say, hey, we're going to branch out, spread our legs a little bit, spread our wings, and see what other flavor profiles we can create as some of this stuff too.
Yeah, and as a sales guy, I thought, what could be really the difference between using 2 different blends of coffee and the same base recipe? Because, it's the beer will really shine through. The coffee will just provide that basic coffee flavor. But, I think I poured the Little Goat, and we can try the Spot Saver. They're completely different. And it really is because of the roast that they use. But I don't recommend doing one of those, though, before trying the Delco and the Up and
All right, so which one are we doing next? You're our beer tour guide today.
I recommend doing the Delco.
Okay.
That is our number 2 brand. So Pony Brewers are number 3. Delco's our number 2. It's our oldest beer. It was the beer that we started with. So Bob, when we first got together, Bob said, we're all talking about what we want to brew. What would be our how do we enter the market? What beers are we going to use? And, me, the assistant brewer Ruby at the time, Stigs, we're all talking, throwing out all these styles. And Bob, who's very quiet, big, intimidating guy too. And we're like, Bob, like, you haven't even said what you want to brew. He's like, I don't care what we brew, as long as we brew Delco and lager, And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm so sick of my friends, because he's from Glen Olden.
Right.
So that Interborough, Ridley, Tinicum, you know it well. Great people, salt of the earth. But it's funny, it's Delaware County, when you talk to wholesalers who sell beer to Philly Fife County market, Delaware County is always dead last in craft beer sales. And a lot of that's just like some hang-ups on like, hey, I have my beer. I don't want to try anything new. Why would I deviate from that? There's not like a much tolerance for change, which, can work in some cases, and also like be like, hey, there's some cool stuff out there. Also, like
Delco is so Silver Linings Playbook.
Yeah.
This is the way it is.
Yeah.
This is the way it's always been. And this is the way it shall be.
Right, exactly. So, and the other thing is, like, sometimes they think we can't have nice things, but, maybe we can. Maybe we can provide that for you. So and that was a big thing about, you had mentioned earlier, the consistency is really important, getting a good product in there. And you do that enough, and you're consistent, eventually you're going to break somebody down because their buddy had tried it, or you're just a nice guy and like, all right, we'll give you a chance, that sort of thing. And this was the beer that we thought would be the gateway beer for Delaware County. Ironically, we sell more beer in Philadelphia with Delco, than Delco.
Well, is that distributed at Citizens Bank Park?
No, we don't. They might have it at Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo, okay.
They used to. We used to do 16-ounce cans there. I think they do Up and Out now.
Okay.
So I haven't done the Citizens Bank Park yet. So it's usually some negotiations that have to occur.
I don't even have to help you send an email.
You got a guy?
The podcast.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
Why don't they have that at the park?
They're good people,
The Phillies would have won the World Series if they would have had that.
That's why I say get Schwarber at Delco. He would have hammered some of those other balls. But no, it's Philadelphia. Like, I think Delco, the name does travel well in this region, even though people might talk a little smack on it. But yeah, that beer for some reason moves extremely well in Philadelphia. So
I get the philosophy, and I'm really glad that you talked about that. That this is the path we're going to set out on. Mm-hmm. We want to establish a fan base.
Yeah.
And we recognize who our drinkers are in the community, and this is what they're asking for.
Yep.
You establish the name, 2SP. Oh, yeah, I had one of those. And then you start to get people to say, well, what else do you have? What else might I like that you make? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much nuttiness, there's so much roastiness to this.
Yeah.
It's, again, these are easy to drink, but lots of flavor.
Yep.
I actually enjoy the dryness that comes out at the end.
Yep.
And
I love that too. Yeah, I like that you pointed that out.
This is really nice. And people are like, well, I don't want a dryness of a beer, or maybe that's not the experience they're looking for. I think for me, this makes me just want more.
Exactly.
I just want to continue to drink this. Yeah,
no, that's exactly it. And that's what you kind of strive for with our lager. And then we have another Pilsner, which I didn't pour, called Corona. And that dryness is just what makes it so refreshing. And that's what a lot of beers, macro beers, craft beers, when they brew lagers, might miss. And I love that. And, the one thing I really like about it is like, I have friends who leave the beer industry and sell wine and spirits. Like, there's a little bit more money in there. I get it. But I always like staying in beer because there's a little romanticism there. Like, when I first got in, what attracted me to beer was you can have a world-class product for $1 or $2 more than your mass domestic, right? You can go into your local store, you can pick up what's considered bottom of the barrel, right? For $5, $6, $7 a six-pack. Then you can pick up something that's the best in the world for $8, $9, $10, $11 a six-pack. You do that with wine, you do that with liquor, you do that with whiskey, whatever it is, you're paying not $20 a bottle. You're paying $80, $100, $200, $500, $1,000 a barrel. So the access, the accessibility to this, And that's why, with Delco Lager, it's like, yeah, it's a simple lager, but it's definitely different. It definitely has a flavor profile that stands out compared to, I won't name names, like I said, but some other beers, some domestics that do that style. They focus solely on that style.
I think, again, for me, if I'm going to sit down and I want some lager, this is a nice variety for me. Yeah. And a lot of craft breweries, they may shy away, or the lager or even a pilsner, maybe we've got to satisfy somebody here.
Yeah.
Let's just brew this. Let's just get it on the tap, and maybe we'll sell some cans. But I think from the standpoint, you've already started out with the philosophy, this is going to be quality.
Yeah.
And you taste it. There's more of an experience here than just thinking, all right, my buddies, they're having IPAs or they're having some other things that I just don't like.
Yep.
I feel like I'm kind of I don't want those beers, but all right, I'll have one. But now I get to enjoy something too.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and we're always looking to improve it too. It's not just we came up with the recipe and that's what we've been brewing the same beer for 8 years. We've made adjustments to it. We were like, okay, that dryness, we really. We experimented a little bit. We're like, we really want to lean into that a little bit more. So let's extend fermentation time a little bit, right? Let's let it settle for a moment. Let's let the yeast do its thing. So it's not just this, we found a good recipe. Let's just continue to execute that day in, day out. It's like, okay, how do we improve upon that, right? Without throwing the baby out with the bathwater with hopping it up or just doing something crazy to it. So, but yeah, no, I'm glad you recognize that though with that beer.
Where to next?
Up and Out. So
Out.
This is our number one seller. It was a beer that wasn't going to happen. It's a hazy IPA, 6%. So when we started this brewery, the IPA craze IPAs were always a thing. 2006, 2007, when I was with Rogue, West Coast IPAs, right? That's all it was. How hoppy can you make a beer? How many IBUs, right? For your listeners, it was IBUs, International Bittering Units. So it's just if it was most normal beers are 40, 50 with the IPAs, and that's pretty strong. The guys will be coming out with 90, 100 IBUs, and it was just not astringent, but it was borderline undrinkable. Then you had this whole complete change to the hazy IPAs, where it's I don't want bitter at all. I want this to taste like a fruit juice almost. And when you make that kind of a turnaround, it's a little polarizing, and our brewers are like, wait a second, IPAs, that's not what we know. And I was like, we should try this. We should get into it. And we were a little reluctant, and Bob really likes brewing lagers, light lagers. He knows that's on his mind, coming from Iron Hill, light lagers really sold. And I said, this IPA, that we got to give it a shot. And he brewed it, and it was fantastic. And like I said, Bob's a big guy, I'm a big guy. And, we had a few meetings in the back where I know who was going to come out alive. It probably wasn't going to be me. But I was like, we got to do this. And I get to rub it in his face now because it's over 40% of our business. And it's a really good, easy to drink, fresh IPA, local, that we make with, there's a little Cascade and Columbus in there. So when you have hazy IPAs, I had mentioned before, they're really juicy, right? We kind of like to have our beers with a refreshing finish, like you mentioned with the Delco. So when you have hazy IPAs, that juicy flavor that you get, it means there is no hops during the bittering part, right? So essentially when you brew a beer, you have to bring the beer to a boil, and it's over 220 degrees. When you throw the hops in the beginning of the boil, you extract the acids from the hops. And hops are they're from the weed family, and they look like guinea pig food, all right? And they have all these acids in them. So when you put them in the boil early on, it gives it some time to get those acids out, which gives the beer that bitterness. Brewers are like, you know what, screw it. We're not going to throw any hops during the boil. We're just going to throw it in during the whirlpool when it's cooling down, so we can just get the flavors and aromas. We wanted to throw some hops in the beginning of that boil to give it that little bit, not necessarily bitterness, but that refreshing crispness. So that's what really differentiates this versus others. And also the price point's pretty good at the shelf. So you're not paying $20, $25 for a 4-pack. This is day in, day out, between $12 and $14.
that hoppiness lingers. That's there.
Yeah.
The juiciness is there, but I believe there's a nice flavor balance that you go back to.
Yeah.
On the initial sip, the mouthfeel, it's very clean. There's not a lot of viscosity, which allows for those oils, those flavors just to kind of dance around the tongue. But it's when you swallow.
Yeah.
That I think it's almost like that hoppy, that bitterness. That's where it explodes.
Yeah.
And it just kind of just remains there. I mean, I think it's been a couple of minutes since I had a sip, and it's still there.
There you go.
For me.
That's awesome.
And if you listen to the podcast enough, Dawn and I, we're not huge IPA people.
Yeah.
That's one of the things, because we have a difficulty gravitating towards that bitterness.
Yeah.
Like you said, we've had things that I guess a lot of IPA drinkers would say, oh, we love this.
Yeah.
And that would be, as you pointed out, that could be 60 to 80 IBUs. But to us, it's 1,000 IBUs.
Yeah.
Where does this come in on the IBU scale?
It's low. I would say it's about 30 to 40. So it's lowish, I should say. If you have our up and away, that's our double version of that, it's actually less, which is pretty crazy. But we want to give that, a little bit of bitterness, though. Just like you're saying, it lingers. It's a refreshing kind of, it still hangs around. Where you drink other, like hazy or New England style IPAs, it's very... it tastes like juice. And when you have an orange juice or whatever it is, if it's more sweet and there's not as much citrus, the flavor just kind of goes down, right? Doesn't hang around too much. But yeah, with that, it's interesting. It does hang around. That bitterness is there, and that bitterness lingers. So.
To your point, I mean, it was something, as I was thinking, that it's got very, very orange characteristics to it, but it's almost, what's that?
Yeah.
Grapefruit.
I'm picking up grapefruit.
Yep, absolutely.
It's also as if you peeled the rind and just put rind into that too. It really brings out more of that. The bitterness is there, and you talk about the hops, but I get the bitterness as more of a citrus bitterness.
Sure.
And that's what comes across.
Yeah, not a resiness.
The oiliness, the oilness of that really comes across.
That's awesome. That's good. Yeah, there's different types of bitterness that you can get from all different types of beer. You can get espresso-like bitterness from stouts. You can get, as you said, grapefruit, citrus. You can also get like piney or resin from those West Coast style IPAs. Yeah, for sure. And then you can get no bitterness from some of these beers. Like if you have like a smoked beer or what have you. If you have like just like I mentioned before, the juicy IPAs. But it's funny, listening to you really do have a palate for this stuff. And there's only one other person who I can like tolerate listening, like explain their beer.
Thanks, Mike. You're tolerating me.
No. Because you have other people and you're like, oh, you just roll your eyes. You're like, oh, please stop. The other person would be, her name's Rebecca Newman. I work with her at Dogfish. She was the head of quality control, but she was the one who came up with, she worked at Sam Adams before, Boston Beer. And you remember the perfect pint glass, the perfect pour? She developed that. And I could just sit and just listen to her talk about, approachable though, and it's not too highfalutin, and it's like, oh, this is why I'm enjoying it, right? Most people are just kind of passive. Oh yeah, it tastes good, but it's nice to hear, the reasons as to why without being like off put by like some pompous, like, yeah.
I don't know if that's Delco or not. I don't know.
Let's give that one to Delco.
All right, one more thing about this. You mentioned just that citrusy, that flavor profile. I'm thinking, wow, what happens if you add gin to this? Because you mentioned the West Coast with the piney.
Yeah.
What happens if you make a cocktail with gin or even like a screwball?
Yeah, get some of that juniper berry flavor going or something, sprucey. Yeah, I would.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't imagine you're making some beer cocktails back there.
Yeah, no, we're taking shots.
Okay.
But it's tequila and whiskey. I'm not a tequila guy. They are, but yeah, we just take shots. We don't get that clever.
Right, for somebody, we'll send this out to the main line where they're fancy and highfalutin.
Yeah.
And they'll make a mimosa out of it or something.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Where are we going next, Mike?
All right. Next one, I would recommend the Baby Bob Stout. So that's the middle one there. So, what Bob becomes, Bob is, like I mentioned, our head brewer, Delco native. What he is most well known for, his Russian Imperial Stout. So I have that as well.
You do a big Russian release, too, which I love. You have Spite Pizza Pastry here.
Yeah,
you have Munchie Machine was here the day we were here. But Yeah, I already see you hoarding that, Dawn, so it's okay. I mean, but one of the things is, Bob said, you told the listener that about, the lagers and the focus on that.
Yeah.
But I get a sense Bob's a stout guy.
Bob's he drink. It's funny. I will say he will drink everything, and meaning that if we have an English IPA on, it's new. He's like, oh, this is really good, or a Dunkel, or anything, right? And then he'll have a stout too. He doesn't kind of stick to his style. Where if you see me here, I'm most likely drinking the Pony Boy or a Corona Pils, right? You see Joe, he's probably drinking a Delco or an Up and Out. Bob really drinks the gamut. And it's interesting watching him drink because he's a man of few words, but when he's excited about something, he doesn't necessarily have to tell you. You just can kind of see it. But I think we all get the sense he's a stout guy, though, because just of his physical presence, right? Just kind of big and then, big beard and kind of medieval looking, right? Or, just looks like he can put a herding on you like a stout would, right? So, but our stouts are very approachable. The Baby Bob is a petite version, if you want to call it that, a small version of the Russian. It's an American stout, though, more than anything. So American stout does have that hoppiness, versus say an Irish dry stout. An Irish dry stout doesn't really have any bitterness whatsoever. It's more about the texture. It's more about the mouthfeel. With this one, the flavors really come out with coffee. I think coffee's a big one, espresso, but it also has that hoppiness and that roasty flavor, that roasty character. And he likes to use chocolate malt a lot. So there's that sweetness. That's his favorite malt, is chocolate malt. It's not a secret necessarily, but it's definitely something that other brewers recognize. Like, this guy knows what he's doing, and it's his love for specific malts that really kind of amplify that.
What's the secret that seems to be in all of them? They all seem to have this creamy consistency, and it's like you want to salivate. All of them, I just want to keep drinking after having every single one of them.
I love it.
So smooth.
I love it. I don't know. It might be what they sprinkle in, to each keg, but I'm not sure. But no, I have no idea. But could be like the yeast strain. Could be just the processes that we employ.
Pardon the interruption. If you like what you hear, if you love what you're hearing, please share the podcast. Please take a screenshot of the podcast, post it on your social media, tag us just to let everybody else know about Fermented Adventure, the podcast. We'd be grateful for your help to grow our podcast.
There you go.
No, I'm loving this, and I was sipping it and trying to get really, when you try to nose and drink a beer at the same time?
Yeah.
Don't do that. This is a public service announcement. Yeah. But you're right, Dawn. There's a creamy consistency over everything in all the beers.
Yeah.
So if it's a proprietary secret, that's okay too.
Trust me, there's nothing really secret other than there's nothing really secret about it. It's like I said, it's Bob. I mentioned he worked at Iron Hill, and let me say this. When I worked at Rogue, our brewer was John Meyer, and I remember running into Alaskan Brewing, some of their guys, their CEO, and he says, "Oh, you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with Alaskan, but they have a very, very famous beer called Smoked Porter." And they say, "Oh, how do you like your beer?" I mean, he says, "How do you like your beer?" And I said, "What do you mean? It's your beer." He's like, "No, that's your beer. That's John Meyer's recipe." And John Meyer used to work from Alaskan before he worked at Rogue, and he left the recipe there. So, and that's, part of the business, right? You don't take your recipes with you when you leave. It's the company's. So Bob has brewed the Russian. He's brewed all these other stouts, and they're great beers. They're nationally recognized, and he'll leave them at other places, and guys will take that recipe to other breweries because, brewers, they tend to move around a lot. But just because you have the recipe, it's not about that. It's much more. It's about, it's the cleanliness. If you walk through to our brewery, the process, the care, it's not just throwing a bunch of ingredients in a soup pot and it's going to come out the same time. The flavor's going to come out the same each time. It's much different. So I don't know what the thing is, but I think it's like a combination of many different things that come from, having a really experienced brewer.
I'm going to say it's the wooder.
There you go. Save some water. Keep it simple.
And everything's light too, because I know after having even a couple beers, even if we're sharing,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to drink any more beer, and I'm still fine. Like, I still feel like I think either everything's just light enough, or that creaminess just wants me to keep drinking, which is nice for beer because I usually am not like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Keep drinking.
We will. We got 2 more to at least enjoy right now.
So the one I recommend next is the Goat. So that is the coffee stout we did with Little Goat Coffee out of Newark, Delaware. So yeah, we were really happy with that. It was a combination of different roasts. I want to say it was Ethiopian and Guatemalan. And it was a combination of light and medium roasts. And they threw some Sumatra, I believe, in there too, which is a darker roast that they used. So, I mean, it's big coffee flavors, but delicate enough. And I think what we really strive for is finding the balance. So yes, we want big coffee flavors, but we also want the base of the beer to really come through. And hopefully one amplifies the other and vice versa. So we really want to get the sweet berry flavors that come out from the coffee, right? And sometimes that will take, the chocolate part of the beer to really kind of the sweetness of it, right? To really showcase that.
It's got a nice nose on it too.
Yeah.
I want to invite the listener out to 2SP here.
Yeah.
And when you do, put your headphones on and re-listen to this part of the podcast as you take us through this flight and really get the description and how you put together this flight and what people are going to take the characteristics of the beer. That's a great experience.
Yeah.
And they're all different, but they're all delicious. But as you were talking about this beer, I was just living through that experience. And I want other people to live through that experience.
Definitely. Awesome. That's awesome.
Also, all right, so I'm one of those guys. I love, the coffee. And I've really gotten in tune to drinking with oat milk.
Okay.
And I want to do, again, I'm going to make a cocktail or we're going to do something fun with this.
Sure.
But I'm going to do the oat goat.
There you go.
And you just put a little splash of oat milk in here just to take out, what that creaminess is going to be.
Sure.
Because there's tons of creaminess in here. You mentioned, hey, that chocolatey note.
Yeah.
And then you go into what I really resonated with, Mike, that you said was you still want to be reminded this isn't just a coffee. It's not like a nitro, something you buy in a little can. You still get the bitterness of the beer.
Yeah.
You still know you're drinking a beer with this, and that's delightful.
Right. Yeah. And that's, sometimes coffee stouts, they'll put a lot of lactose in them, and it's kind of like, that gives it much more creaminess, but
I just want to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. The aroma is fantastic. And especially when you pop open a can of it, I think it's still out in the market. You might be able to find it, but when you crack open a can, those aromas just get pushed down into your face, and it's awesome. Fresh milk coffee. It's freshly roasted. We get it. They roast it for us, and it's generally like 2 days, 3 days after the roast, we blend it with the finished beer. So it doesn't go during in the beginning of the brew process. It's already fermented out, and then we cycle it through this kind of like R2D2 looking container that holds the coffee, and we cycle it in between the tanks. It goes into picks up all the coffee in the one tank, and we push it back through the other until we find that balance where it's like, all right, we got enough coffee extraction from it. Let's get this in the can or in the keg.
I want to be here on brewing day when you do this, because I can't imagine what the smell must be like back there.
It's crazy.
It really is.
It really does fill up the brewery. I will say that, yeah. It's not like other brew days where you kind of just get a rich oatmeal. It's definitely big coffee aromas. You can't miss it. We were brewing the Wawa beer. We brewed a small amount of that. We brewed about, I want to say about 60 barrels between the two brands. Which is it's a nice sized batch. The Wawa was like 300, 350. So we had a ton of coffee in here, and it was awesome. I loved it. But yeah, it's a fun day to be here. So
I see a Russian sitting there.
Yeah. So this is the beer that really put Bob on the map. It's easily it's what I knew him for before starting up the company. It's what everybody who's in the industry who's familiar with Bob, they know about this stout. It's funny. So I went out to our first year. We went out to Great American Beer Fest, which is a huge festival in Denver. I want to say it's like 1,500 breweries actually show up, but there's tons of breweries that enter. You don't have to show up to the Great American Beer Fest. Includes a contest where they judge the top beers in each category. So breweries from all over submit, and a lot of them show up to the event as well. So I thought, me having worked for Rogue and working for Dogfish, big national breweries, Bob working at Iron Hill, which he was only brewing there, I thought, I'm going to see a lot of my friends in the industry. I'm going to introduce them to everybody. Bob was there, and he was sitting at Falling Rock, and I'm not kidding. It was like people were coming up and kissing the ring. And he's a humble guy. It didn't look like that. But I saw it. I'm like, I thought I was going to be the guy. And I couldn't believe it. The first night, we're packing in at the festival. So the festival's 3 days. And after the first night, Garrett Oliver, who is like the who's who of brewers in our world. So there's not many. There's Ken Grossman. There's Sam Calgione. Garrett Oliver's in that class. He's the head brewer at Brooklyn. And he came up and he says, my last beer of the night has to be Bob's Russian. I'm like, what? Who the hell is this guy? I just know him as Bob Barrar, some guy like cargo short wearing, guy from Glen Olden, some inner barrel buck. And here's Garrett Oliver, the guy who wrote the Oxford Companion to Beer. And he's saying, I want his beer to be my last one. So it's a 9% Imperial Stout. I mean, it's everything. He's the only one who's allowed to brew it, really. We only brew it once a year. We brew it twice. We do some in bourbon barrels. You're going to release this tomorrow, you said?
The podcast will release tomorrow.
So the end of this week, we're going to release the Bourbon Russian. So, yeah. So we got some exciting. That beer is just, it's rich, but it's very approachable. It's 9%. My mom, who doesn't really drink beer, she even enjoys this one. Espresso-like finish, right? Maybe there's a little bit of slight licorice flavor to it. Plum.
I'm trying to figure out. There's something I'm trying to get my.
Well, we've had this before.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just going through the succession of what we just had. It's the first time I've had this where I get like this minty note to this. Yeah. And it's almost like where it comes to being like a little bit of like a chocolate mint.
Okay.
Like a chocolate chip mint.
Yeah.
And I've never had that experience with this before. So I don't know.
Not too minty, though.
No.
I'm not picking up mint, but I'm trying to figure out what I'm picking up.
It's like a really cool mint.
Yeah.
For me.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't gotten mint from the beer, but it might be that progression with the goat or something, having the coffee beer. Because that is a bold beer.
And I'm enjoying that, by the way.
No, yeah.
It's not off-putting at all. It's really delightful.
I was part of I won't name the company who I was with, but we had a messed up batch of beer, and they thought, we can play around with it and make it sellable.
Just send it to a distillery and let them make whiskey out of it.
Well, they decide.
Barrel aged, this one?
No,
that's
okay.
not. That's what I'm thinking of.
But
you think it's the oakiness of it? Like you're thinking that's what your mind is saying?
Yeah. So they put a lot of mint into this beer, and it was awful.
We had one of those too. Remember down in Maryland? I won't mention the name of that brewery either. That was, I can say overall, I think 95% of the beer we drink.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was horrid.
Yeah. And usually, like, the bartender will give you a fair warning, and in fairness, this one did. And I'm like, I'll still try it. I suffered through it. Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? I get a little drunk, That's it. So, yeah, but no, with that beer, I would say the dominant flavor is chocolate espresso, a little bit of coffee flavor, licorice, black licorice, but very subtle on the black licorice because I don't like black licorice. But yeah, it's awesome. The bourbon barrel age has got this nice vanilla. Plum?
Well, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
What I enjoy about the beers and all of your beers is, sometimes we talk about session, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that even when I started with the Pony Boy and I came back to it, there was a little bit left in my glass. It still had some different flavor profile than when I started. As things were, as the glass or what's in it, the beer warms up, it brings about some different character.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that about the beer, even with this Russian. I could just sip this. I'm for me, this is one of the go-tos when we come here. Although I've never smoked a cigar.
Oh, yeah.
I could just see this is like a cigar companion beer.
We've got, we got a couple guys from Chester that come in.
From Chester.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's great. We're in Aston, but it's weird. Our mailing address is Aston, but technically we're in Chester's municipality. So we get a couple guys in from Chester who, it's funny, it's great. They come in and for that community, the black community, they don't, especially in Chester, they're not exposed to craft beer. And you got to think, like I mentioned before, Delaware County was one of the few places that hasn't had much doesn't drink much craft beer. Chester is like zero. And a couple of the guys come in, they say, "Oh, you should come to the bar with us and like maybe sample us on sample some of the guys who we know who own bars." I'm like, yeah, I'll go in. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, no, it's not your typical craft beer bar for sure. But I'm like, I'm looking at what they're drinking. And they're drinking, like, Corona. They're drinking Heineken. My beer's not as expensive. Our beer is the same price, maybe a little bit more expensive. And we're made down the street. Like, so I would pour samples out, and everybody, it's been fun for me because, I gave a presentation at Wawa, I want to say about 2 years ago. And I'm looking at the room, it's about 100 people. And I said, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, when I first started in this industry in 2006, 2007, if I was in the same room and I asked how many of you had craft beer before, maybe 5%, 7% of the room would raise their hand. 5 years, 8 years later, when I started working for Dogfish, maybe half the room. Today, it's like everybody raises their hand.
Yeah.
Yep. If I go into Chester, how many of you have tried craft beer? Nobody raises their hand. And it's fun because it's the same thing I experienced, 8 years ago. What the hell is this? Oh, what is that? But they all hang out and they want to try more and they want to drink it. And they were like, oh, this is actually good. This is unique. This is different. So, we're not moving any mountains over there, but it's fun. And a lot of guys come through. They love the Russian and they love smoking cigars with it. I'm not a cigar smoker myself, but these guys are serious cigar smokers and they advocate like this is the best beer to have with a cigar. So
you touch on something really important because you think in the craft brewing industry that everybody's a craft beer drinker and everybody's had it. But there's still burgeoning opportunities and markets to bring in that new craft beer experience, that new drinker. It's nice to see there's more African-American, black-owned breweries opening up.
Yeah.
One just opened up in the city. I think we've talked to them about maybe visiting with them. And But that's that, like, oh, my God, who is going to drink this? I mean, this isn't our community. This isn't what our demographic drinks. But if you start exposing them and giving them opportunities, if you love beer, you want to try something. And I can understand why for that Russian, there's so much depth and complexity to it. But all the beers, not just that one.
Yeah, no, and that's the one thing that, if we're to pride ourselves on, one thing is the variety of beers that we put out. So you'll often see, Belgians on tap, stouts, IPAs, lagers, pilsners. We'll do a smoked Helles. We'll do, I don't know. We'll do a nice triple. We don't do these things ironically. We do these things because
you give thought to it, right?
Yeah, it's not like, oh, we should do
and
this.
And that pollination
and a beer to meal, right? That's like one of my favorite styles that not many breweries do, and it's expensive to make. But an imperial honey saison,
especially as honey keeps going up and up and up in cost.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's one of our most expensive beers, and it's imagine trying. We have a 20-barrel system here, so every batch of beer we brew will either yield 40 half kegs, right, or 120 sixtels, or like 200 to 300 cases. I mean, to some breweries selling that much, 60 sixtels of, or 120 sixtels of imperial honey saison is no tall order. Like, they can distribute all over the country. When you're a brewery based in Delco, imperial honey saison is not exactly the easiest sell, but we'll do it, and we want to do it, and we approach it the same way we do all of our beers. Not just hey, let's come up with a cute name and put a cool sticker on it. It's let's develop something fun here that we can we can all get behind. But the one last thing I'll say about it is it's when we go out, our salespeople go out in the market, they can go pitch a new beer, and a beer buyer at the most respected beer bars, like let's say Monk's or Jose Pistolas or something, they won't need samples of our beer. They've had it. They know Bob. If we come out with something new, yeah, we'll order it. Yeah, it's on. It's no problem. And that's been like it for day one since for us, which is, rare, but that speaks to, Bob's pedigree.
So you talk about all that. What's the future of 2SP look like?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Have you had the year-end plan?
We play with crayons a lot here. We're always kind of like, yeah, this is what we'll do. We mentioned it earlier. When we started this business, we thought the beer industry would look one way. Then, 2 years in, it was like, wow, look at all these breweries and look at what they're doing with 16-ounce cans. The marketplace completely changed. And then as we're just getting our, footing to this change, COVID occurs, the pandemic. And the pandemic was just like, our whole business model needed to change because most of our business was done in bars. It wasn't done through, grocery stores or beer distributors, beer stores. So it's like, crap, we just lost 70% of our business. We have to rethink it. And then, we had some things happen this year, which were kind of crazy. And, the economy's doing what it's doing. People are just adjusting. So now it's like, all right, this is going to be the first full year. We're looking ahead. Let's just evaluate, and keep doing what we're doing, but also let's expand on what we do well. So I mentioned we're building a new pizza spot in Newark, Delaware. We do food really well. So if you haven't been to a Two Stones pub or a 2SP tap house, the food's excellent. So same kind of, Stiggs has the same approach. It's kind of, he says preserving the craft, but it's a nice saying, but in practice, he hires executive chefs at each of the restaurants that have good background. So each restaurant has its own unique menu. They all use great ingredients, and it's all approachable. It's the same kind of, you go into one of the Two Stones, a 2SP tap house, a 2SP pizza, you're going to have the same kind of feeling as walking into the brewery. It's just fun, it's easy, it's no frills, but really good. I think it's just kind of expanding on that. I think there's plenty of room to grow in Delco. Trying to convert as many drinks as possible. Tell them to drink the 2SP Kool-Aid. But yeah, the future, I maybe we'll go into Taiwan. I don't know. So, yeah.
Well, if you're going into Taiwan, then next thing is China.
So. I do have a connection. It's funny. I have a guy who goes, Felix. He exports to Shanghai and Beijing. And, he's like... He deals with more of the flashy breweries, but he loves us, and he's like, he wants to bring us on because there's more of a market now. I think the flash of the pan kind of breweries are, and I won't name names. Like I said, people want quality now. They just don't want to spend their dollars on the new cool thing with a nice little sticker on it. They want to get something that they're confident in, especially in tougher times, right? It's just like, gas prices might go up, right? Maybe I won't buy that $25 bottle of Bourbon Rush, and please do, but they'll buy a Delco Lager now instead, or a Corona, something that's easy, something that they can get behind.
Mike, this has been awesome.
Good.
This has exceeded my expectations. What really stood out for me is, just the way you took us through all your beers. And whether you're going to a Two Stones or you're going to be going to that pizza place, I'm looking forward to that in Newark, Delaware. They have no idea what's about to hit them. But 2SP, and you can see why the billboards on 95, why you really are that brewery. Hey, it says it right here, you're made in Delco.
Right.
But if you're made in Delco, you're really putting out this personality that says welcome.
Yeah.
Because we want everybody to say, hey, this is awesome. This is great. This is great beer. I can drink this every day and enjoy it.
Yep.
You're coming to the brewery and you're looking to get a cheesesteak. What are you buying? Where are you going?
Cheesesteak. I'm either going to Coco's, which is right down the street here, and you can get it delivered, or Las Pedas.
Or the Spaders.
Spaders, yeah. I think Coco's for the win, though, with that. Yeah.
Coco's for the win.
Yeah.
So you've had your cheesesteak this one day. You're looking for a pizza option. Where are you going for pizza?
Oh, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but Coco's. The Coco's folks are really great. They're awesome people. They really do make good pizza too. I love their white pie. I'm sorry,
That's
it's
all
not
right.
we have options here, but I really do like Coco's. Yeah.
Now, I already know pretty much the answer to this because of the Wawa experience with 2SP. But, you need a convenience store option and you're on your way to the brewery.
Yeah.
Are you stopping off at Royal Farms or are you going right to Wawa?
I can't walk. Nah, you gotta get a Wawa. We're in Delco, we gotta root for the home team here, So Wawa.
All right, people have listened to the podcast now. We've gotten to this point, and you've been a lot of places. Here in Delco, if somebody and you go out, how would you explain Delco to somebody?
I would use what our warehouse guy says, that how do you describe Delco and the people at Delco? And he said, it looks like everybody just got a softball practice. So I don't know what that means, but it's, let's just say Delco is, I love it. I mean, there's pockets here that you get different personalities and, people in Glen Olden or Tinicum, right? People in Glen Olden will, they're different than the people in Tinicum. The people in Tinicum are different than those in Newtown Square. There's pockets here and they all have something great about them. They all have really great restaurants, with a different kind of attitude that they're welcome. They want you to come in. They want to, put their best foot forward, but they're not going to try to overly impress you. You know what I mean? They're not going to try to win you over, with just, pomp and what have you. The Delco is just a real place with good people and a great atmosphere.
So, Mike, you have friends coming in from out of town, and you want to send them someplace, you want to take them someplace. Besides 2SP, where are you giving them that over at Delco experience? What are you doing?
I've got a soft spot for Monahan's in Tinicum, Essington area. It's right by Lou Turk's. It's literally right behind there. But Monahan's, if you go in there, there's a lot of guys who worked at the airport that day. It's just Joe Monahan is one of the best people out there. Just runs a great Irish bar. I would go there, and maybe I would go to, you're putting me on the spot. I love the Brick and Brews. I love the Townhouse and Media. Those are two totally different atmospheres than the guys at Monahan's. I take them to Charlie's Burgers. And then one last thing. I don't know. That's a great question. Delco Steaks. I really like their steaks. Or Thunderbird. We'll do a Delco Steaks versus Thunderbird. I got a soft spot for Thunderbird too, but I don't know. I'll
tell you what. I want to drop what we're doing now and just do this experience.
Yeah.
The
Are you a Thunderbird guy or Delco? Yeah.
Original Thunderbird. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
The Delco experience with Mike.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. I would love that. Let me ask you a question. Yeah. I didn't ask you this on the podcast earlier. But what motivates you? What gets you out of bed?
Oh, I don't know. I ask myself that every morning. No, I don't know. What gets you out? I really do enjoy. It's fun. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you work for a brewery. How cool is that?" I think it's great. At the end of the day, you get to have a beer, right? And that's part of work. But I think what's really awesome is that you get to work with people you really love, you care for, and you want to see succeed. And the other thing is like, what's fun is, and what keeps me getting up is, this is just us. There's no, you'll hear, I won't, again, mention names, but a lot of breweries, you'd be surprised who's backing them. Like private equity money, or there's a lot of different investors. It's just us here at the brewery. And Stig's built a great little restaurant group by himself, and he was able to fund this brewery. There's nobody else. It's just us. So, if I fail, it's not like somebody has deep pockets to kind of make up for it. Or if Bob makes a bad batch, and, it's us. And every day we got to kind of, really, go out there and prove ourselves and make this work, because really there's no other option. So, it's fun, and just getting to work with people that you really like and care for and you want to see win as much as you want to see you yourself win. That's what I think is the biggest thing.
You've been in this industry for a long time. I mean, overall, a lot of people have not had the staying power as you've had, because, people get into it, they do some sales for a couple of years, and they move on to some different things. But look at the people either you've met along the way, or people you've heard about. who mentors you, or who is it that you say that's a standout that really gets me going? A couple things. We employ unemployables. That's the one thing. It's like there's not. And I think the beer industry at large is kind of like that as well. It's like there might be not too many options for guys like us, right? So, I think what really stands out is when I don't have that necessarily, that personally, that mentor or whatever that really is like, man, I read Warren Buffett's book, and that really kind of, I think always like, we're Americans here. At the end of the day, we're always rooting for the underdog. So it's like whenever you see those little things, and Delco as a whole feels like an underdog, right? So I think just watching the community, watching, us have that moment, whether it's 2SP or Delco and people around us doing great things, that's really motivating. That's the thing that kind of is just like, oh, hell yeah, like, Delco can have nice things. We can do things right. We can do things better than those guys over there in Chester County or whatever, So, yeah, we might build your houses, but whatever, it's like, we can do it. So I wouldn't say there's anybody specifically, but just that desire just to continue to improve, and seeing that the community does that as well. Mike, for Dawn and I, and our fermented adventure, we're grateful for your time today. Thanks for being a friend of what's happening, Delco. And 2SP. And if anybody, believe it or not, has not had a beer from here, you definitely need to check, at least, get a Pony Boy, get the Delco. If you're a big stout fan, there's plenty here that Bob makes, or, you mentioned that there's Hellas, the Marzen, the Dunkel. I mean, list goes on. And for us, I mean, you will already have your Russian bourbon release. Maybe you'll have some bottles still hanging out in the cooler, but you got to stop by. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, guys.